Welcome back for another installment of Fellowship of the Rink, brought to you by our incredible friends at Waggle Golf, 9 Mile Brewing, and Barrel Theory Beer Company. With me for a second week in a row is Joe Smith. What's up, everybody? I'm Isha Jomi, filling in for Scott yet again. He's on the mend, Joe. He's on the mend. He'll be back next week, but good to sit next to you again, sir. Joe Smith, of course, of The Athletic, bringing you all the insider info in your Minnesota Wild. And, well, now, Frozen Four hockey. Joe, how's it going?
Good. It looks like Kirill Kaprizov will return before Scott does. So who would have thought that?
We should have made some bets last week, to be honest.
Yeah, well, he can sandbag that one too. So we'll see how the sickness and no voice thing's going with his wife too. See if he's getting any breaks and anything else with the childcare stuff. But I'm assuming that injury is not is something you can play through at home.
Yeah.
So
I guess last week was just straight up upper body. Now we're day to day. Because I did see him over the weekend. I was like, oh yeah, you weren't lying. You're talking like this. That doesn't. I mean, I'm sure there's a brand for the ASMR podcast, but it certainly is not a hockey show. So happy to fill in here again, Joe. And let's just start right away with the Frozen Four, as you'll be there next week.
I will this week, actually tomorrow. So
leaving. Yeah, there you go. You're on your way.
Leaving tomorrow for St. Louis. My third straight year doing the Frozen Four. A couple of years ago, I kind of embedded with the Gophers, Faber, Nyes, and Cooley's last run, and last year's with BU, and this year, a lot of storylines for the Frozen Four. But I'll be following Denver closely, University of Denver, who's the preeminent program in college hockey now, with a record 10 national championships, going for a repeat. Obviously, a player Wild fans know well, and Zeev Buium, who will very well be signing his pro contract once their season is over, whether it's Thursday or Saturday. Rieger Lorenz, another Wild prospect, people should know. He'll be playing for them as well.
Well, and Joe, they'll know him. They'll know him well after this episode because he's the featured guest here today.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we wanted to make sure because I know I don't want it to be a Zeev show, right? I mean, it's natural for that. And I think, Denver, staff and everybody, all the press conference questions in St. Paul 3 weeks ago were surprised about Zeev. People should know that it would be Zeev questions when they played the games in St. Paul a few weeks back for the showcase. But it should be a lot of fun. Penn State in their first ever appearance in the Frozen Four, Western Michigan, kind of a newbie as well. And then the two kind of blue bloods or current blue bloods in Boston University and Denver. So it should be a lot of fun. Yeah,
no Minnesota teams appearing in the Frozen Four, which is always a little weird, but it's even more weird this year when you said like 2 out of the 4 teams aren't like mainstays. They're newbies to an extent, and some just getting to see this limelight for the first time in years.
What do you make? I mean, I have to ask you, since you probably watched them a little more than I did even this year, the Gophers. Were you surprised with the mass exodus of players from that program?
I was. Now there were a few that I figured. Matthew Wood was the surprising one. I thought that he probably could have stayed another year. I thought like the Nashville Predators don't necessarily need him right now. Like they don't need him to develop in like the AHL or under them right now. I mean, it's not going to hurt him by any means. But I figured like out of the bunch, that's the one that's what surprised me the most. Especially I thought the Gophers would probably want him to be in that elevated role next year, since some of their top guys left as well. But it's just interesting because with Nashville, with Nashville's offseason last year and coming into this season, I would have said Matthew Wood has easily another year with the Gophers. With what happened this year, I can understand it a little bit more. They're kind of in their, I don't want to say rebuild, but retooling on the fly, and let's see what we got with guys that we can pay cheaper if they are ready for pro, and let's fast track some of these guys a little bit, because we do have these big dogs on the contract now where maybe we can salvage, a good couple years, or even maybe this year just a mulligan. Maybe let's fix some things and bring some young guys in to do some patchwork on the cheap. So long and the short of it, I understand it a little bit more now. But yeah, Matthew Wood was the big one that surprised me.
And I think we all knew Nuggerud was gone, right?
Yeah,
I thought,
for sure.
And Rinzel, you probably thought was gone. I thought maybe there was a chance Oliver Moore stayed. I wasn't sure.
I was more surprised. I guess. Not surprised, but if you would have told me Wood or Rinzel, I probably would have been like Wood going pro. So that, I guess, him and Snuggerud I thought were locks. Rinzel, like, I figured, but I wasn't as bullish on. But yeah, it was a max exodus, like you said, and it's going to be interesting to see, well, who gets the elevated roles next year out of the guys who are obviously coming back. Obviously some really good young talent on that team, and then who they're going to bring in potentially. It's a new crop this year or transfers and things like that, and maybe WHL, OHL, QMJHL, like who knows? Because everything's a big shakeup this year, right?
Absolutely, and I think Mott's got to be in the transfer portal pretty heavy. I think at this point, and I think if you're a player on the edge there, and you're like, Gophers have a chance that you have top 6 spots. Like, I think it's a pretty inviting place to go if you're a player that's maybe playing for a program that's not quite in that upper echelon. You're like, okay, I could play for the Gophers in this role. There's some really, I think, interesting openings there that they could take advantage of if they try, which I'm sure they will.
Yeah, I'm very much like, I love Major Junior. I love the BCHL as far as Junior A goes, and I follow Major Junior quite closely. This year, not as much as years past, but mostly the WHL. I still keep a lot of tabs on. I mean, I grew up in Prince George. I went to college in Victoria. And I lived in Calgary for a few years as well. I had season tickets at least at one point to every single one of their junior teams. So I loved everything the Dub and Major Junior offers. And I, upon moving to the States, obviously have really gotten into college hockey, but now it's kind of like their worlds are mixed. So this next season, I'm almost more excited for this college and just Major Junior season to see all the movement and how, well, the leagues kind of, or just the organizations just adapt, given these new rules. So I'm almost more excited for this year for college and this upcoming year next year for college and Major Junior, just to see what happens with the landscape than that of the NHL.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously part of the CBA. It'll be an interesting conversation to have among all that different thing. Their talks are going on now between the NHL and NHLPA over a million different issues. It's not the front burning issue is that, but it'll be an important one, I think, for a lot of people. Yeah,
and I think maybe next year after there's a little bit of sample size of like what's going on and what are some maybe things that people expose that we got to like tighten up on. Then I think we'll hear more, especially moving into those CBA talks like next year, once there's like, okay, we have a little bit of like the lay of the land of how it operated this first year. Let's see how it affects the highest level moving forward and have these conversations from there. So yeah, it's exciting. It's different. I'm sure some people can be critical on both ends, but from a fan perspective, it's exciting.
Definitely. There's a lot of college players, I think right now, speaking of guys who are leaving, who will be interesting college free agent signings, not just for the Wild, other ones. So I think that's another reason why we look forward to going to the Frozen Four to kind of see who's up in the air, who might be able to be signed, but not just the Wild, other teams.
Yeah, it's always a fun time of year to see where they go. I would say more so for like the markets whose teams are kind of out of it, because it's like, you've been slugging it like out of the playoff picture, been slugging along for a bit. And, oh, there's some news, there's some excitement. A college player coming in. I remember, the dark days of Willie Desjardins and Travis Green in Vancouver. Post the Sedin era, the Canucks. We were out of it for a while, Joe. And the college free agent time was like, okay, this is the last little spark of the season that I can get excited for before just watching playoffs in general. So, always an exciting time. Nonetheless, speaking of excitement, though, let's talk a little bit about the Minnesota Wild, especially. Let's just start with the big win against Dallas the other night. Unbelievable performance. Now, wasn't able to watch the first 10 minutes because TNT, shout to Ovechkin, beating Gretzky's record. I know you and Scott are going to talk about that a little bit more next week. But what a performance by the Minnesota Wild. Still without X, still without Middleton, still without Kaprizov. I think as a whole, the entire game, the entire team played an excellent game of hockey, and leave it to Boldy and Rossi to, continue to fill in for those scoring spots this season.
Loyal SodaPod listeners, if you're in the South Metro or just need to explore some new breweries, head to Bloomington's first and only tap room, 9 Mile Brewing. Some of my favorite beers on tap right now are Current Obsession, 9 Mile's flagship New England IPA, and Harness the Dark, their Imperial Rye Porter aged in J. Carver rye whiskey barrels, brewed in collaboration with J. Carver for their 3rd anniversary party just this last month. 9 Mile will be hosting bingo every Thursday with 2 blackout games starting at $500 and one progressing up to as much as $1,000.
I think it was an absolutely like a gut check moment for them. You know, how last week went, they lost all 3 games, got 2 points in that 3-game trip to New York, and guys looked despondent after Friday's loss on the island. And it wasn't, they didn't have the effort or intensity they needed in a game like that, which is why John Hines was so ticked off about it. And obviously the missed major call on the hit from Horvat and Middleton, you lose a top 4 defenseman, which now is only day to day versus could have been a lot worse. But Dallas at home was never an easy game, and they played, you know, with the required, you know, mentality, the intensity, emotion,
speed. They matched the speed too. Like
they matched the speed.
Both teams were giving each other like less than an inch to work throughout the majority of the game, which I thought was like, okay, yeah, they're matching them here, and they don't have their top guys.
And I think, you know, the way that they handled it, you know, admittedly a soft goal by Gustafsson there early on, and he bounced back from that. The penalty kill was 5 for 5, which when can you say that about this team this season? But they, including one with 4 minutes to go and Faber in the box, they killed that one. It was a 2-2 game. You know, you look at the situation where, you know, Matt Boldy, like that's a play they want to see Matt Boldy play. That's the way they want Matt Boldy to play all the time. Like this guy goes
in the slot and just hammering it home. That was gorgeous.
If he goes to the hard areas, he fought for a position. He got a deflection from Spurgeon's shot. Then he turned around, found the loose puck, and just as he went to his knees, whacked it in. That's like a play he's capable of making. But if he goes to those areas in the playoffs like that, they'll have a lot more success. And I think that was an encouraging moment where no Kaprizov still, no Eriksson. They need a guy to make a play to tie the game. And that was there are very few game breakers left on this up front. You know, maybe Rossi and Boldy and Zuccarello, as you saw on the overtime winner. But you need a guy to make a play in a game like that where Ottinger is just usually lights out against the Wild. And so that was a big lift weight off their shoulders. And then, you know, the sick pass from Rossi to Foligno.
Yeah, I originally thought that bounced off like a skate, and Foligno, like one of the skates or the legs of the players in front of the net, and that Foligno like was able to calm things down and get the shot. I didn't realize until on replay that it was right to Foligno, and I was like, oh, that was sick. So yeah, Rossi and Boldy played excellent as well. Definitely like the two standouts to really, I don't even say put the team on the back because the team did well, but to be able to score and win the game.
And like to see like they have this great effort and they're controlling a lot of play, and then 2-2 game now because there's a shot goes off Bogosian's leg
right after they
into
kill
the net,
penalty.
and you're
right
like, this
after
is
they kill the penalty.
And this is where it could all go to hell, right? Like, you know, Friday's game, they dipped after they gave up that second or was it the third goal or second goal? I can't remember which one it was, but they really dipped after that. And so them to stick with it, kill a power play, go to overtime, and then obviously have the ability to come through and get those 2 points because Calgary's been pushing, right? Calgary's been pushing, you know, about magic numbers here for the playoffs, and like they don't
the
win that
Flames and Blues, man.
Yeah, like they don't win that game in regulation, or we don't win the game at all. You don't get 2 points out of that. Then all of a sudden you're in a much stressful state here this week, especially with Calgary on the road coming. So bought them some time. You know, they play when this podcast drops on Wednesday. Play San Jose. A chance to further in. Kirill Kaprizov is expected to, in our estimation, be back in the lineup, which will be a huge boost, you know, for them. And I know it'll take some time for him to get back to his usual self, but just having another guy, a game breaker in the lineup, get him some runway before the playoffs to get ready. It's going to be a tremendous thing for them.
Absolutely. So you talked about Kaprizov set to come back against the Sharks. Any updates on Eriksson?
Not yet. Like I think he's a little bit behind Kaprizov, so I don't think he'll play Wednesday. But you know, they're obviously have been maintaining that he'll get back. They feel by the end of the regular season. There's only 3 games after Wednesday, right?
Yeah.
So we'll
Hopefully
see.
two.
And even if it's one of those back-to-back games or the finale, or get him to one of those games. And I can guarantee, just having been around Eriksson, he's probably pushing right now to play. Like he's like sick and tired of being out there, and so.
And they're like, we've seen this before. Like we know you'll bring it when you're ready, but like we don't want to lose you for playoffs. And we want you at your near best during playoffs. So I get it.
So just having those two guys back, and I don't think people can just assume that they're going to be like ready to like 100% ready right away. Like it just takes after so much time off, like between months or 2 months for Eriksson Act 2. But clearly it helps slot guys in the lineup in a much better position, and gives guys in the different roles, and other teams have to focus on Kaprizov's line than Boldy's line, and all that stuff. And Marcus Foligno has been their top line winger, which he's done well the last week. But you imagine putting him down and then having Kaprizov there, and then Foligno is a second or third line winger. Like it fits all much better.
And Gaudreau's line getting some easier matchups head to head, and he's been playing very well in an elevated role too. And like you say, like even if put him and Foligno on the same line, and they're getting matchups against other teams' third or fourth lines, like man, they've been playing way better competition and matchups throughout the season due to these injuries. So like they're almost primed, and that's like I think one thing that a lot of people are overlooking too. Like some of these bottom six players for the Wild who've been playing well, like they have been getting reps all season against really, really good competition. So like come playoff time, like they can lean on their depth if Kaprizov and and Ek do need like limiting minutes to get back into the groove of things, right?
Absolutely. And then they're going to want to make sure that they're ready to go against Winnipeg or whoever they play in the first round on the road. So
God, the first round's going to be tough for guys. Winnipeg, Dallas, like, oh my God, it's going to be... I mean, that's playoffs. There's no easy matchups in the playoffs.
Just getting there, considering how the last 2 months has gone.
Yeah.
I mean, and not considering how the first 2 months went, but how the last 2 months went, like just getting there, and guys can, it's a whole new season, a whole new start, and, and make the other team beat you. And so I think the Wild fans are excited just to be able to be a big sigh of relief if they actually clinch a playoff spot, which they could happen later this week.
Absolutely. Before I get to your Iowa Wild trip here, I just wanted to ask you, because this was a question that was coming up in my live chat when I was covering the game on the SodaPod YouTube channel the other day. Has Marc-Andre Fleury played his last professional hockey game?
No, he hasn't. My guess is he'll play Saturday in Vancouver.
Okay.
Back to back, they play Friday, Calgary, Saturday, Vancouver. And I initially thought that he'd get that game and then maybe the last game of the season against Anaheim. But I'm also thinking if he plays Saturday and then he plays Wednesday, like that'll be like a week and a half before Gus goes between starts for the playoffs, which would probably start the 19th.
Fresh.
So like I thought maybe if they had the playoff spot locked up, they give Fleury the final game on Tuesday or whatever, Wednesday. But then now if you're a team that's preparing for the playoffs, do you want your number one goalie to go 9 days between starts before game one against Winnipeg or whoever? So I think Vancouver game could very well be his last start.
Okay.
In the NHL. So it could be an important game. So
I mean, honestly, Joe, they're all important games.
Yeah.
Right? Like right now, like they're in a position where they're even if they would have lost the game against Dallas, they're still, I think it was 75% chance, which is a huge dip from like, it was like, I think it was as low as like 85 if they lost in overtime or something, right? But like, so yeah, like there's a really good chance, but like, dude, anything can happen in this league. Like a team can go on a little bit of run here at the end in the last 4 or 5 games and really shake things up in the West. So what I was saying on stream was just like, don't even entertain that you can give away points at this point. Like, play like you're in the playoffs, right?
Yeah, only time I initially thought Fleury would start the last game of the home game because of if they had the playoff spot already, the seeding was already wrapped up.
Yeah.
And even though that might be the case now, that might be the 8th seed by this weekend. That'll still be a decision for the coaching staff to decide. Maybe Gus needs the rest after playing 13 or 14 games, or now 14 or 15 games probably. Maybe they'll want to give him rest, but some always want to play and want to feel it, so they'll have a lot of practices in that week leading up to the playoffs. So that'll be a decision in my mind for the coaching staff of if you have the playoff spot locked up, do you give Fleury the last home game, let him have his last flowers, I guess, and the home ovation that he absolutely deserves. In
Canada, that would be cool.
But Saturday's game in Vancouver for sure.
Yeah, far from home, wrong coast, but still in Canada nonetheless. All right. Tell us about your Iowa trip. You teased it last week. And do you have any updates on any of the players down there? I know the Wild fans want to hear about Wallstedt, so you'll obviously get into that. But just tell us about the trip, some of the guys you talked to, and what to look forward to for them next season and this offseason?
Well, like, it's been another kind of tough season in Iowa, right? And they won 4 straight as of this recording. So they've been encouraged by that way they played down the stretch, which is a good sign considering they started 0-6-1, which put any team in a hole. And so I guess to give the guys credit for like not bailing, as season went on. And so it shows a little bit about the coaching staff and stuff that they're still playing well at this point. They're still like mathematically alive for a playoff spot right now. I don't think they're going to make it, but they're still there. But yeah, I just always, every year I go there for at least a weekend to see a couple of games. And, I like to see the prospects up close versus watching video on box scores. And, just seeing where the development program is, because it's so important to see what they do at all the levels. And you saw it in Tampa, you saw it in Dallas, you saw it in Nashville, and how important those AHL programs are. So some highlights, Hunter Haight, really impressive, like first year pro, like, you knew he'd had the skill, but the staff there really loves like his two-way game, like his played all situations, like the kind of guy that really kind of wants it all. And he seemed like a pro already after it was, into 1 year, the way he thinks and the way he interacts and stuff. He just turned 21 while I was there, I think. So I think that's an encouraging moment, I think, for Wild fans as a prospect, where he's a guy, I think, who will absolutely push for a call up starting next season, or in camp push for a spot, like Riley Height, who has some heroics going into Game 7, I think it's tonight or something like that for in WHL. Like, Hunter Haight's kind of pushing Riley Height, Height hasn't done it in pro level yet.
Yeah.
So Hunter Haight's already kind of shown that he can be a pro and play at this level in playoff situations. So that'll be an interesting dynamic of who passes who on the depth chart when it comes to that.
So if it wasn't for that silly rule where he had to go back to silly's a stretch. I just say it's silly. Scott will argue against it, but anyways, due to that rule that like he couldn't, like under 20 he has to go back, like he would have been playing pro ideally probably if the Wild could like map out his development without that caveat.
No, it's true, and we would see a lot more from Riley Height this year at the pro level. I think it'll be more important than seeing him at junior level.
But yeah,
scoring against. But Hunter Haight's a positive. Carson Lambos is taking big strides in a year.
Which is
people have asked about him for a long time. He got some call ups this year, didn't play necessarily get the playing time he wanted to get in the NHL, but he's a legit kind of Damon Hunt, the next Damon Hunt version, right, where he can play some NHL games next year, or be a black ace for the playoffs, whatever. He just kind of mentally, I think he flipped a switch after the Hunt trade, and they told him, hey, you can play everywhere now. They kind of sheltered him the first year. Like they gave him all the situations that, hey, you can be in a top pairing role. You can, be in the last minute. You could play a peak. You could do all this other stuff. It really took to that and owned it, and, kind of helped him get through that certain stretch. So I think that's an encouraging, talk about the positives, I guess here first, with the Wild and their development program. Trying to think, I did a few stories there. I'm going to report those as we go along between like how the development's going, the coaching staff, all that stuff. Jesper Wallstedt, I saw him, he was practicing with the team while I was there. He's going to return. There are plans for him to return Wednesday, the day of this podcast comes out. I think in Milwaukee. Missed the last 3 weeks with an injury. He's had 3 different injuries this year. Kind of a lost year for him, but I think the people I've talked to there and him a little bit, they're not as discouraged as maybe the fan base is about where he's at, that they felt like, the start of this year was rough in terms of thinking he'd be in Minnesota, and he wasn't, and he didn't handle it as well as he admittedly should have. Took a while to land back in Iowa. But they were encouraged at kind of what they saw day to day and how he rehabbed his injuries and came back and was playing really well before his last injury in mid-March, to the point where they think that a guy who didn't really have much adversity, quote unquote, in his career before that, always the top goalie of his age group, for a long time, to have this will help him and serve him well when he's in the NHL and goes through that. So whether that happens or not, we don't know. But like, I think my read was that, it was a rough year, and a setback in certain senses, but it wasn't like a death knell for Jesper. They shouldn't be overly concerned necessarily. I think it's very well fair to expect them to have him as a backup next year for Philip Gustafsson, play 20-something games and see who he is, right? So the talent didn't go away just because the numbers were rougher this year. So for that, Jesper Wallstedt is kind of another one of my stories I'm working on from Iowa. But clearly he won't be a factor right now, or in theory unless there's something bad happens in the playoffs. So something for him to work on and have a good summer in Minnesota and see what happens.
No, absolutely. And did you get to talk or see any of Samuel Leviado? I know he was a big guy who played a little bit of pro overseas in Europe, played a little bit of major junior. They brought him in this year, and it seemed like they leaned on him quite a bit, Joe, over 30 games. And I'm looking at his stats, and it looks like he fit right into the AHL.
He played well.
Yeah, when Wallstedt, next year the plan is for him to ultimately be in the National Hockey League. Is Iowa like excited and satisfied with this only 23-year-old who already had pro experience coming in and basically ready to take the reins moving forward?
I would assume that he'd have a great shot at it, and I'm really wondering to myself, like, considering you have Gustafsson and if you have your backup as Wallstedt, do you consider finding a veteran guy to go to Iowa, and maybe whether he's a 1B or whatever, like a guy who's played NHL games, a guy who can step in case Wallstedt or whatever happens up there, because I think Sam had a great year. I think he showed a lot of improvement. I think they relied on him a lot. Showed some mental toughness in games too when they didn't play as well. So, question is he the number 3 guy? Is he a great number 3 for them, or are they comfortable with him as number 3 guy?
Yeah.
That's the question to me. I don't think that it's a question of his future. I think it's a question of right now, like going to next fall. Like, do they feel like maybe a veteran guy to pair with him next year and help him develop, and also be a guy they can call up as a third goalie in case they need to? So that'd be my question, probably, that Hendricks will have to deal with, the GM of Iowa, of like, how do they make sure they have some depth there at the goalie position, and they know they've had some injuries before.
Good problem to have, like a still young guy with pro experience who came in and had a good year, right? Like that's a check. That's a check on the box, being like, okay, this is good. This is good. We got someone here. And he just seems like a character as well. I know in like preseason and all the like the camps and stuff like that. Like, he was the one everyone had like the funny stories about. Did he not like break like the air dime or something? He was going like too hard, or was just too big?
I'm not sure. I'll look at the videos. They do a lot of really fun videos on the Iowa site and stuff, where they're like when they pranked Wallstedt and had his stuff out of his hotel room into the hallway for April Fools, which was pretty fun. But yeah, I think he's really well liked dude in the team, and so I think the summer will be big for him as well to see what happens for next year.
Well, that's awesome. Sounds like a good trip, and I can't wait, as are all our listeners, to see the article and write up on Wallstedt. But speaking of Wild prospects, let's get to one here. Wild second round pick and current University of Denver forward Rieger Lorenz on the other side.
This interview is brought to you by our friends at Waggle Golf. Waggle Golf believes what you wear on the course should reflect your individuality, who you are, where you're from, your hobbies, interests, and passions. All the stuff that makes you, well, you. That's why every design is inspired by the desire to create a piece of apparel that strikes a chord when you see it. That makes you say, wow, that was made for me. Because in a lot of ways, it was. Ready to get your waggle on? Go to getyourwaggleon.com, throw in promo code SP10 at checkout to take 10% off your entire order. Joining the show today is one of us by way of the 56th overall pick in the second round of the 2022 NHL draft. Thanks for jumping on, Rieger Lorenz. Rieger, how are we doing, man?
What's going on, guys? Thanks for having me.
Great to have you. And weird question that we always kind of start with, bit of a Rorschach test. Minnesota Wild logo is very controversial, apparently. Like, there's a lot of debate online about what it actually is. First time you saw it, what'd you think it was?
That's funny. I remember kind of growing up, I didn't know what it was really. So it was kind of the Wild logo. But I remember getting drafted there, and I heard it was an animal. I kind of looked closer. And I thought it was a beaver actually for about a year. So like after I was drafted, I thought it was a beaver. Then I remember going to development camp and someone said it was a bear. So I probably shouldn't be telling you guys that, but yeah.
No, we had someone say spaceship, so like you're okay. You're safe
Like,
with that.
like UFO, I think it was one of the guys
Yeah.
mentioned it.
Beaver is like that. That's just too Canadian of you.
Yeah.
I know where you're from. So we're the our name of our podcast is Fellowship of the Rink, which I'm sure you can guess, Lord of the Rings fandom on our end. I wasn't sure if you're a Lord of the Rings fan or if you have kind of a nerd itch or something kind of quirky off ice that you're really into, a book series, movie series, or collectibles. Like, what's your thing like that?
Yeah, no, I've never really gotten to Lord of the Rings. I think growing up, my dad and I watched The Hobbit, those movies, so I enjoyed those. Last year I actually got into Game of Thrones with some of my roommates.
Okay.
So I remember, around Christmas time there, we binge watched that pretty good. And I enjoyed that. But no, nothing really too quirky for me. I guess I'm more
I don't know
more
if you're a
normal.
South Park guy too, Rieger, but I've got a South Park and Game of Thrones crossover mug here, and those are like two of my favorite things.
That's awesome. Yeah,
South
we got some guys in our team who love South Park. So
Have you
it's
been
awesome.
out to Casa Bonita out there?
No, it's funny. We actually have some swimmers on our on the Denver swim team that have gone and performed there, I guess. So you hear about it a little bit, but no, I haven't gone out there.
Are they like the cliff jumpers or whatever?
Yeah, no, I think they jump from like 50 feet up in the air and stuff, which is
That's
crazy.
so cool.
Pretty brave. Pretty
Yeah.
brave. You mentioned growing up, like who were the players that you looked up to growing up? Was it like a Braden Point? Even I know he's still kind of young. I guess you're young too. But who were the guys that you grew up, watching and kind of idolizing?
Yeah, I mean, I used to have some personal ties to kind of the Oilers organization, and my parents were from up north there, so I was always an Oilers fan growing up. Alex Hemsky was a guy when I was a little bit younger that I loved watching. Just he was so silky on the ice, the way he played the game. And then when I got a little bit older, Jordan Eberle obviously wears the same number as I do. That World Junior goal kind of solidified his spot in my heart as a young kid. So yeah, those two kind of stick out for me.
Do you have like posters on the wall in your room, or what was your get up of like?
Yeah, no, I got a Jordan Eberle poster in my room. I got an Alex Hemsky jersey. Yeah, so I was a pretty diehard Oiler fan back in the day.
Nice. Tell us then, Canadian boy, why college hockey?
Yeah, so my dad actually played college hockey for Notre Dame.
No kidding.
So I was kind of drawn towards that. He kind of knew the benefits of it. He went through it. Obviously, the mix of education and athletics there. So when I was going through the WHL draft thing, I think he always, made sure that he let me make my own decision, but he kind of made sure that I, knew the benefits of college hockey. And I think, I was obviously naturally, more inclined to go that route. And when Tavis and the DU coaching staff reached out to me before WHL draft, when I was, I think, 14 there, I think it was a no-brainer for me, just kind of knowing the pedigree of the program and kind of what they have to offer.
Cool. So go ahead.
So and obviously it seemed like a no-brainer at the time. Was there other schools that were interested, and like were there the ones that you were like at least wanted to like visit or check it out and see before making that decision?
Yeah, I mean, I was super young. I know a few schools reached out. I know Notre Dame, I think, reached out as well. Just because my dad was an alma mater there. But yeah, no, I think Denver reached out pretty early, and when I went down, saw like I said, what they have to offer with the coaching staff, the culture there, and just kind of the winning pedigree. Like I said, it was a no-brainer for me, and I was super excited to jump the gun.
Yeah, and with the new rules now for CHL to NCAA, like what do you think about all of that? And would have been a no-brainer for you to play in the WHL if that was the case?
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard to look back, I guess. I think I'm excited for it. I think it elevates college hockey in a really good way. I feel bad for some of the tier 2 junior organizations that might, kind of take a beating there a little bit. But yeah, no, I think, honestly, looking back, I was super happy with my path. Obviously, I had my 16-year-old year in Okotoks there. And that was a COVID year, so we only played 7 games. But then I, got a full season, 17 there, which was my draft year. But I think, yeah, I mean, if I was going through it, I think my 17-year-old year there would have been a great opportunity to go play in WHL. But yeah, no, it's hindsight's 2020, I guess.
What was your first impression of DC or David Carl as you in that? I know Tab and Milton was one who recruited you a lot, but what was your initial impression with him?
Yeah, just super professional. The year that I committed there was his first year coaching, and I think he would have been younger than 30, which is crazy to think about. But he's super professional. He knows the game really well. He connects with the players. I'm kind of using his age to his advantage there. No, he's awesome. He's kind of the main reason why I committed to Denver.
Does anybody ever call him coach? Is it like how did DC? Does he just say that the first time you meet him, like, hey, just call me DC? Like, it seems like everybody I've talked to from his early years did not just call him DC.
Yeah, no, it's all DC. I think, and that kind of speaks to the way that he kind of is viewed in the room. He's more a mentor and kind of a coach second. So yeah.
And when you guys on campus, like, I know there's a few different spots that I think Zeev mentioned before, but like, what's your go-to spot? What are your places that it's a beautiful place to live, of course, if you want to be adventurous, like out in the mountains, but like, what are your some go-to campus spots that you would certainly miss if you had decided to go pro?
Yeah, I think we're so lucky to have a campus here in a city like Denver. We go to some other places like St. Cloud and Minnesota, and it's a little tougher there. There's not as much to do. But I think some places stick out would be like Illegal Pete's, Spanky, just some restaurants that guys, after the games go and hang out at, and yeah.
So I mean, you're gonna talk down on St. Cloud, which is actually already ingratiating you as a Minnesotan. Like, what about Minnesota? You were out here for the national championship. Obviously, a lot of fun memories go with that. But like, anything just about being out here in Minnesota that you're like, oh, it's gonna be kind of cool to come back here.
Yeah, I think it's just the way that hockey is kind of viewed in that state. I remember it was pretty eye-opening going there for my first development camp. Just how intense the fans are, and how well that team's supported. So I think it's super exciting and super motivating for me in the coming years to make sure I get to that level.
Yeah, and what guys like at the dev camp? Is anyone that stood out as like just like really cool guys you're excited to see again, or guys you could see yourself playing with?
I think my first year, the two guys that stood out would be Ogren and Yurov. They were obviously first rounders my year. So just kind of, benchmarking myself against them, kind of, what I need to improve on, to get to that level and hopefully, live out my dream one day.
What's your most vivid memory of the draft for you?
So I actually didn't get to go to the draft. I was stuck here. I had to do summer school. So my parents actually came. We got a hotel. And my girlfriend came down as well, and we watched the draft on a laptop. So I don't know. Just honestly, I think after I got drafted, my dad started tearing up. And I don't really see him do that too much. So that was a pretty vivid memory for me. Just all the hard work they've put in. To see that kind of come to fruition was pretty special.
Did you think the Wild were going to be taking you? Like, what were the interviews like pre-draft?
Yeah, I mean, I was obviously in a spot in the draft where I think like a lot of teams could have taken me. So I think I had 27 interviews at the combine. So I didn't have too good an idea, where I was going to go in the draft or, to what team. But I knew I had a really good interview with Billy G and the Wild. So I knew that was a possibility. And obviously once it happened, I was super, super happy and on top of the world.
Any like weird stunts or quirky moves from Billy? Like someone said he was hiding behind a curtain and popped out. Like any funny stories from him or any of the other teams you met with?
No, nothing from Billy. We just kind of went in there, shook hands, and then went along with the interview. But I remember the Avs. I walked in there, and they had a big garbage can out in the other side of the room. We had to throw a saltwater taffy in it. So I guess to get the competitive juices flowing before the interview to see how I'd react. But that was kind of one that stood out for me.
How big was the garbage can?
A normal size garbage can. It wasn't too big. I remember not doing too well. I was pretty nervous. So
you mentioned your dad. Obviously tearing up at the time getting drafted, and having a guy who played, in your family like that had to be such a big benefit growing up. Like, was he a coach for you a lot, or like what was the kind of influence that he had kind of with you?
Yeah, we're super close. He's been almost like my personal coach throughout my whole life. Him and my mom have sacrificed so much for me. I remember my mom, she hasn't worked since I was, 4 or 5 in her whole life, pretty much been getting me to practice and games and stuff like that. And my dad was kind of a busy work schedule. He rarely missed a practice or a game. And if he did, my mom was, videoing it for him. So I'm super grateful for those two, and I wouldn't be here, without their, love and support. Yeah, no, my dad, I can say enough good things about, where he's gotten me to in my hockey career. He's got a very, similar view to me and what kind of player I can be. And, after every game, we're chatting and kind of, scheming how to get to the next level. So yeah, no, just super fortunate to have a dad and a mom like that.
What kind of player do you guys envision yourself you being? I think you mentioned, like, when I talked to you a couple months ago, just working on your two-way game and stuff, like what kind of style of player do you think, when you're the finished product with Minnesota, you'd be?
Yeah, I think, coming out of junior, I remember teams asked me at the combine. I did a lot of things well, but I didn't really have a, identity as a player. I think, my 2.5, 3 years here at Denver, I've really kind of turned into a power forward, a two-way power forward. And I credit that to, DC and the coaching staff. But yeah, no, I think, in the next, next year and a half here before I turn pro, I'd love to just kind of, really kind of relish what DC has to offer and, really tune up my two-way game and, hopefully be ready to make that next jump.
And I know the Wild are pretty patient with their prospects. Is it kind of the plan for you to finish up at Denver or next year and a half and work on it versus signing earlier and starting your pro hockey career?
Yeah, I think that's the plan. I think I still have a lot of development here. Obviously, it's been a little bit individually, a little bit of a frustrating season, production-wise. I look back and watch some games last year, and I have a lot more of an impact this year than I did last year on the games. Just the pucks aren't going in for me right now. I think coming back one more year, elevating my role on the team, and will be super beneficial to me, and will serve me better in the long run.
And I gotta say, man, I was sitting right on that corner at the X when you scored that absolute snipe in the championship game. Like, what does that feel like?
Yeah, I mean, I remember. I still don't really remember like the goal or anything. I go back and watch the highlights, and it's pretty cool. But no, just that championship was with my best friends was the greatest time of my life. The 2 weeks ensuing were also pretty fun. The celebrations here on campus. But no, I get chills every time I think about it, and we're hoping to do it again this April.
What was the coolest part of the celebration, either at the X or back on campus? Because I love those things there's multiple celebrations to go on after a game like that.
Yeah, no, I think the thing that sticks out for me, after we won, obviously we were on top of the world, in the dressing room and stuff, and we're kind of looking on our phones, and there was like parades and stuff going on here on campus. Like there was a SWAT team here, on the roads because there were so many people. So it was pretty cool to see, the campus and the school behind us, supporting us in the way that they do.
Nice. I'm going to need the inside track, by the way. If you guys do go back to back, I'm going to need to know where the after party is in St. Louis. So you'll have to slip that over to us somehow.
Yeah, I'll shoot you a text.
Tell you.
Go ahead, sorry, Todd.
We've had him on before. I know Wild fans know a lot about him because of all the excitement last year being drafted. What can you tell us that maybe we don't know about Zeev Buium?
Yeah, I mean, he's obviously he's so fun to watch, and he's a special kid. I remember when he came in on his freshman year, not that the draft rankings really mean anything, but he was supposed to go kind of that early second, kind of in the 30s or whatever, which is obviously he'd be a good player for us, and we were excited to have him. I remember skating with him a little bit, and obviously no one's really, trying that hard in summer skates, like when you're playing games or whatever in the early summer. I remember he was ramping up to go to World Juniors, and we did kind of a one-on-one skate with Power Edge Pro stuff, those little like apparatuses on the ice there. And, I like to think I'm pretty good at that stuff. But I remember, him going through it with, his speed and finesse. And it was mind blowing to me. So I remember calling my dad saying this kid's not going to go in the 30s. He was going to be a first rounder. And obviously, he proved that, that coming season too. I think he had, I don't know the exact stat line, but around 50 points as a, true freshman, draft eligible. And, he hasn't really stopped it this year either. So, we're super happy to have him. He's a great kid. He's a close friend of mine. And I couldn't say enough good things about him.
He played like 35 minutes one game or something like that. I saw. Like, you ever look at him like, holy crap, how do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, he's so effortless on the ice, so like it makes sense. But I couldn't play 35. I guess I'm a forward, but I can't even imagine playing 60% of the game.
No, we're friends now, Rieger. We're cool, so I can ask you a not fun question.
Yeah.
What's it like for you and the boys? Like, how do you rebound and move forward after a tough showing against a club team in UNLV? Like, what's it like in the locker room after a game like that?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think, at the end of the day, like, I don't think we played that bad, to be honest with you. I think we had 70 shot attempts. Their goal is in their head. Obviously, first game back from Christmas, not to make excuses, but, we're a little bit rusty. I think, it was tough for us as a group, honestly. I think a lot of guys stayed off social media for the ensuing days. But, I think in the long run, I think it'll make us better as a team. I think, I mean, I don't think it's that big of a deal. I know it was, it's a big deal for them, and they played well and they deserve to win. But for us, I mean, it doesn't really deviate from, what we want to accomplish at the end of the year. And, it hasn't really.
How much is this year's team different? Different feel than last year's group. Obviously, it's hard to compare when you win a championship and you lose a bunch of guys from that team. Like, how is this team or this season different for you?
Mm-hmm. I think that's the beauty about college hockey. Every year you lose key guys, and other guys need to step up in big ways, and I think we've had that so far. Last year we're wagging offensively. I don't think we have the firepower necessarily offensively as we did last year, but I think our defensive game can elevate from what it even was last year. So I'm super excited. It's a different team and a different feel, but I think we can have the same success come April.
I think DC mentions every one of his championship teams. He looks at the adversity that they faced during the season and kind of points to that as kind of a reason why they ended up where they did. And I think was the UNLV thing the adversity, or was there other games or other stretches of the season for you that kind of felt like that one pinnacle moment where it was more you can go one way or the other way?
Yeah, I mean, the UNLV wasn't fun. I think although January and kind of the first little bit of February we couldn't really sweep teams. We played really well Friday night. The other team would elevate their game going into Saturday, and I don't think we would really follow. So we've shown growth in that, and that was kind of a hard stretch for us, but we've gone through it, and I think we're better for it.
I mean, good news is the rest of the way, it's all one gamers, so you don't have to worry about that.
Exactly.
Oh,
what do you do like off the ice? Is there other sports? Do you golf? Do you disc golf? Do you do anything? What are your other favorite passions like other than hockey off the ice?
Yeah, during the year it's pretty much just hockey and school. Our schedules are pretty packed that way. In the summer I love I go to British Columbia. I'm lucky enough my family has a lake house there. I love to fish, surf, golf out there. So kind of all the normal things that the hockey players like to do.
Nice. Well,
I don't know if you're allowed to do skiing or surfing, like with the injuries like that. I don't know, like are certain things you're not allowed to do, or certain things you're like they give you free reign to do whatever.
Yeah, I know kind of during winter break, some guys showed us some interest in going skiing or snowboarding up in the mountains here, and I think that was a little bit frowned upon. Just got a little dangerous, so probably stay away from that.
That's fair. But surfing is totally cool?
Yeah, I think surfing's cool. It's pretty low impact.
Okay. I don't know. I've seen people get tossed pretty hard.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
You've been to Red Rocks at all? You've been to any of the, like, you guys go on any trips? Like, I know Zeev mentioned you guys want to see a concert there at some point.
Yeah, no, we went and watched Riley Green, the country artist, there last spring after we won. So that was super cool. Yeah, like I said, we're so fortunate to have be in Denver. There's so many things to do in the spring and summer. That it's awesome.
Is that the go-to country, or are you a pretty wide music supporter?
Yeah, I think before games I like a little bit of rap, but I think for the most part, normal day I'm listening to country usually.
Like, what's the go-to rap song that you need to hear right before you go out on the ice?
I don't mind some Kanye before we go out on the ice. Just be going a little bit.
Final question brought to you as always by our good friends at Waggle Golf. First, make sure you head over to getyourwaggleon.com. Throw in promo code SP10 to take 10% off your entire order.
If you could pick 3 people, could be celebrity, athlete, dead or alive, whatever, make up dream golf foursome, go out for a day. Who are the 3 you're bringing out there, and where are you guys going to go play?
Oh man, I think Augusta is the place to be. I'd say that's an easy one. I'd say, man, maybe Paul Biznat. One, just the personality, and his share some good stories. I'd say Riley Green's probably up there too. Actually, he's my favorite country guy, so he'd be up there. He's a good looking guy too. So, and then oh man, probably go Kobe Bryant. Just read a Kobe Bryant book, and he's an interesting dude. So, I think that those would be my 3 that I play with.
Who'd be in your cart? Who'd be the one you'd ride with?
Oh man, I think Biz. I think we'd have some good combos.
What do you think about just like Biz's impact on hockey of late?
No, I think, growing up, I think hockey was very, a professional kind of atmosphere, especially like in broadcasting and stuff. I think he's kind of brought a fun aspect to it. I think that brings a lot more, viewers and kinds of viewers to hockey, which obviously grows the game. That's, good for all of us. So, I think he's been awesome for the game.
Well, great. Well, thanks so much for joining us. I know it's a busy week heading into some more playoff action. So thanks again for taking the time, and we'll look forward to potentially seeing you in St. Louis down the road here. So
Awesome. Appreciate it, guys. Thank you.
thank you.
That was awesome, Joe. I always dig these interviews.
Yeah.
It's always a pleasure to be able to, because for those who don't know, I produce this show, so I'm behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And I always sometimes be like, oh shoot, like I'm editing this. I got to go back and like actually, like, because I get so adjust the volume or whatever. But I get so into the interviews, and they like everyone who you guys interview seems to open up with you and Scott. And you yourself when you guys talk to them. So great stuff there. And yeah, Rieger is he's a beauty.
He is. He'll be a great fit with the Wild, I think, once he gets there. And I think he's going back for another year in Denver, get his development a little further along. But clearly just a fun guy, a guy who really, he cares about where he's at. He cares about the team, and he's a big part of the culture there at Denver, which I'm looking forward to seeing more this year. But yeah, the interview's been fun, and we appreciate all the hard work you put behind the scenes with all the producing and getting things, making sure we all, sound and look good, so we appreciate all the things you do. And it's fun to have you on this other side to be able to be part of the interview process. Cause I think one of the fun things this year was having like the in-person stuff at the U, and having you as part of the interview crew, Matthew Wood. And when we had the more junior guys, so we'll have to do more of those, three of us part of the interview crew, for some of the live podcasts, but
bring a few Canadian questions in there.
Yeah, we'll find some Western British Columbia questions or Western Canada, and you'll be our expert.
Matthew Wood from my hometown. I couldn't believe it. I was like, man, it's a small world. And like, funny enough, his parents live right near my parents. It's like it's crazy. It's crazy.
It's a small hockey world.
It totally is. So. It totally is. Well, that's it, ladies and gentlemen. We appreciate you guys as always for tuning in. Joe, you teased the Wallstedt story. Anything else coming up this week other than just Frozen Four? Is it all just Frozen Four for the next week?
Well, we'll have Frozen Four. We'll have obviously some more Zeev Buium stuff in his final days, like I did with Brock Faber a couple years back. I have another Zeev story that's running on Thursday, I believe, about what's expected is a pro potential for him. So I think overall we'll have Frozen Four coverage. We'll have the Wild coverage with Kirill Kaprizov potentially returning on Wednesday, and obviously the important coverage of the back-to-back in Calgary and Vancouver. The Mike Russo will be there for that. So stay tuned and figure out where the Wild are going, if anywhere, to start round one on April 19th.
Looking forward to it, Joe. This was fun as always. Guys, subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you're just listening to this via audio, we appreciate you. We got a ton of other shows under the Soda Pod banner, so check those out every weekday, wherever you get your podcasts from. And like I said, the YouTube channel, we got live streams, we got clips of the podcast, we got original content, and even Joe said we went live with a lot of the Wild prospects and Gophers this year in person as well. All that content can be found on the YouTube channel. But that's it for this week. Enjoy the show. Enjoy the hopeful sun we continue to get in this Minnesota springtime. And as always, you stay classy, State of Hockey.